In this next tutorial, we're going to take a look at modeling the top part of the stapler. And in this tutorial, we're going to specifically use subdivision surfaces because it turns out this is a fantastic part of the model to take advantage of that technology. Our starting point is with the model partially finished, and I've drawn in some basic profile lines that will indicate the shape, and we're also going to use the model itself to guide part of the shaping of that top component. So the first thing that we want to do is let's sort of reduce the visual complexity. I'm going to remove all the metal parts. We want to generate the basic geometry, and in fact I'm going to take the base and we're going to turn that off temporarily. So you can see I've got a top profile and then this front profile and then one for the head. Let's come into the front and create a piece of geometry that will give us a starting point to work with. So Shift A, we're going to add a plane, and I'm going to make it 1 centimeter, and we're going to align it to the view so it's about like that. Command A so that we can flatten out the rotation and the scale. So Tab key, let's go into a basic wireframe view here and come over to the Move tool. I always take note the fact that I'm in Select Box or whatever of the selection modes that I'm in. Take these and we're just going to move them over, and we're just going to start matching it up generally to the profile. Take this and we'll just roughly match it in, and then come over into Edge mode, press the E key, and we're just going to start. I'm going to press the X key for this first segment to go along the X, and we're just going to press the X key again and just begin putting segments to roughly match up to the profile. Press the R key to rotate, and then S key to scale it about like that. E key, S, E, R, S, G. So this is the basic process. R key, S, G, roughly matching it in, then E, R, S, and then one final here. Okay, so we've gotten this really basic geometry in place, but I'd like it now to adhere a little bit more closely to the profile. Let's come in now and add a subdivision modifier to this. Let's take the subdivision up to 2. And we want to begin forming this to match the template. We've got a lot of visual clutter going on. So we're going to switch over into on-cage mode so we can directly edit the subdivision without seeing the cage. I want to switch over into vertex mode. When I select an element, we've still got these UI elements, the pivot right here that gets in our way. So we're going to switch over from select box into tweak mode, which is really useful. So I'm just going to deselect everything. And then in one click, I can click, hold, and drag, and I can move this. And this gives me a much better control over tweaking the shape to match my template. So I would just come up, click, hold, and drag, just tweak this until I get everything really the way that I want. I'm not going to worry about the endpoints over here. This is going to be handled a little bit differently. And I think this is pretty good. Okay, so let's come back in, turn off on cage mode. I'm actually going to disable subdivision temporarily. And in fact, I want to come over to my profiles. Let's turn off that top one just to reduce clutter. And I've started the geometry so that the origin, in fact, let me press the tab key to leave edit mode. You can see the little dot, that's the origin. If I press N, I'm wanting my geometry to be exactly at 0 along the x-axis. I'm very, very, very fractionally off, so I'm just going to 0 that out. So that's important for what we're doing with that reference. Okay, tab goes back into edit mode, and let's come in to the top, A key, and I'm going to move all of these out until my eye is basically sort of looking over here, until it matches this sort of farthest point of the profile there. When we rotate again, let's come over into edge mode and take this edge press the E key and begin extruding just along the y-axis. Click. Along the y-axis, I want that to be zeroed out so it's exactly at 0 along the z-axis. But that 0 is in reference to the pivot point's location. That's why I was careful to make sure my model was exactly at 0 at object level along the y-axis. Okay, so now what we need to do is begin forming it to contour to the base of this base geometry. Now I want to come over to the base here, and I want this to be an optimal display. That will just make it easier to see what we're doing. So back in edit mode, we have this contour, this angle that we want the component that we're modeling to match up to. So in vertex mode, I'm going to take all of these points that should be inside, and we're going to move them way far in this direction. And then we're going to use, let's come over to the snapping function, so many icons. We want it to snap to faces, but we're not going to turn it on because there's a cool trick you can do here. If I move this, it'll just intersect with the geometry. But as soon as I hold the control key down, it will temporarily put us into snap mode so that it snaps to that face. So let's do the next one here, this one. So begin moving and then hold the control key down and it'll snap it to that face. Okay, so begin moving, control key, and it will snap it to the interior there. Let's do this one, control, there we go. Okay, so let's look at this one. Control key, and it snaps it to the interior. So you can see how they're kind of contoured to there. So the next thing that we need to do is come to one that won't be using snapping, and we just need to manually contour these. And this is where we just have to use a little bit of judgment and figure out if those sort of come forward. In fact, I think as I examine this, I want to take this point and move it a little bit closer to my profile and this one here. So this is artistic contouring you would do with yours. But the next thing that we need to do is get this top row along here to fit the angle. So let's come over and let's look at this one right here. If we take a look at this along the x-axis, we can simply pull this until it generally matches that angle. Now, Option Z to go into X-ray. And so my eye is looking at this contour. So let's do the next one here. We can generally get this contouring to match up to the geometry. Okay, so the next one here, let's pull that out. And let's rotate the view. So from here, it's just a matter of doing sort of a transition. We'll do the next one. So do you see how I'm just sort of contouring that? That one will probably match up about like that. Okay, so let's do this now. Let's come in and look at what this looks like from a subdivision standpoint. Because this type of object, you're just going to have to toss it around a lot like this and make sure the contour looks good. And let's press the backslash key to take this directly into isolation mode. And we're going to turn subdivision back on. Okay, and then let's look at this in shaded mode. And I'm going to press the tab key to leave edit. Let's turn on smooth shading. And then you kind of look at it to see if it looks good. But I think something that would actually help at this point is if we had the mirror operation in place. It needs to be along the y-axis. In fact, let's take this and move it up above subdivision, and it needs to be along y. So that's the basics of getting that top form in. Let's just look at this. And I think that looks pretty good. In fact, maybe up for this first one here, I'm going to pull this in just a little bit, just so I get sort of the contour comes out. It flares, and then it comes back in a little bit. And I think for these two endpoints, I'm going to move these out just a little. What I would say at this point is let's come into the top view and let's just look at the contour. We've got the mirrored side so we can see that. And I just want to come over and just look and see if there's anything that maybe we can improve just a little bit. About like that. And I think that looks pretty good. In fact, down here, I'm going to press the G key and G again and just sort of slide that out just to get a little bit better distribution. So this is typically what I'll do is I just come in like this and we'll see if I can do any slightly better distribution of points, even though those are pretty small details. In fact, here, GG, pull that out, GG. Okay. Now we're ready to basically cap off the top. So let's do this. Let's come into edge mode. In fact, let's turn off subdivision temporarily. Come all the way from here, hold the control key down and click just the top. Let's do this in outline. Press the E key and then Y, and then press S, Y, and 0 to flatten that out and click. And then we just take this and come over to the median, press 0 along the y-axis, and it gets it right to the center there. So I think what I want to do is merge all of this into a single thing. So this is typically what's going to happen. You've got symmetry on, but you'll end up flattening the symmetry and then removing half of it and putting symmetry on again. It's just the natural flow of the process of modeling. So let's press the tab key. Let's come over to symmetry here and let's apply that tab key. And I want to come in fact, I'm going to look at this in the front view. And do you see how it's totally flat on the top? And I'd really like it to flare a little bit. So this is where we're going to come down here to the shrink fatten function, which will move each of the edges along their own normal direction. But when we do it from the side, you can see the effect that that has is it allows us to move each edge along its own normal. There we go. So vertex mode, let's take this G, X, and I'm going to move that about right there. And then this G key to move it. And then we're going to press B. Now, take note of what's happening here. I'm wanting to move this point and snap it to here, but because we're in face mode, it's expecting me to do this in face mode. So let's press the escape key, and I need to come back over here and switch snapping back into vertex mode. So G and then B grabs the vertex and moves it there. Press the A key, and then let's do merge vertices by distance. It's only going to catch one vertex, which was right there, but it was just easy to select everything. So let's do this now. Let's come back up to the move tool. It's where I tend to default. Click to deselect, Command or Control R, so we can put a loop right about there and click. Now let's focus on the back down here. If we turn subdivision back on, it's a little bit ill-defined. So let's come into the front, press the K key, and about right here, click and draw that down. Press the C key so it goes all the way through, cuts through, and return. Okay. So what we need to do now is we need to sort of cap off the base down here. So let's do this. Let's select these. In fact, let's turn off subdivision. I tend to do that. I turn it on and I turn it off. Sometimes it's just a pain to have it on. Select matching edges on either side, bring up the context menu, and then do a bridge edge loops, Command R, cuts once in the middle, and then select that single edge, G key, and then B, and we're going to snap that point to that point. One key goes into vertex mode, Option Z takes us into outline. Now I'm in tweak mode, so I want to do a select box so I can marquee around those. And then let's do a merge vertices by distance to merge that one vertex. Okay, now here on the bottom, let's take a look at this. we've got something that's a little bit ill-defined. If we turn subdivision back on, let's take a look at this in shaded mode. It's a little bit ill-defined down here in the corner, and I'd like this to be a little bit more defined. So let's do this. Let's come over into edge mode. We're in select box, so I'm going to select those edges. We want to come over to our friend the bevel tool, set it to a 2-1 configuration. Click, hold, and drag, and we're going to pull it out. You're going to notice that at that top apex, the vertex will stop right about there. So that's good. Get to about there. It hasn't welded here yet, though. So let's switch over into vertex mode. Option Z goes into X-ray. So I can marquee. We have 2 overlapped vertices. Bring up the context menu, come and do merge vertices at center, and that has welded them into a single vertex. So Option Z, tab leaves edit, and we have a much more nicely constrained area down here. Okay, the next detail that we want to take care of is I want to look at it and see if there's any more contouring work that I want to do, and I don't think there's anything else that I really want to do. But I do want to add a slight lip around the bottom to give it some visible rounding and thickness. Let's come over here and turn off subdivision for right now, tab key. So this inner lip, we don't need to do it all the way around. I'm not really going to worry about the back here. So I'm going to double click to go around the entire object. I need to hold the control key down, so when I marquee around the back, it removes that selection. And in fact, let's hold the shift key and remove those. I think right to that point is about what I want. Press shift and D to duplicate that. Press the escape key and then press the P key to separate that to its own selection. So leaving edit mode, I want to just edit that separate from the rest of the object. So press the tab key. We're in edge mode still, A key, and then press the F key to fill that with the polygon. Zoom into sort of part of it and press the I key to do an inset. And we're going to come in about that far. And then X key to remove that face. We also want to remove 3 key. We also want to remove this face, X, and we'll delete that there. So again, this is going to be sort of occluded and hidden inside of the object. Now we're going to leave that there temporarily. Let's come back into the main object, and we want to produce another loop boundary that goes all the way around this. Now there are a couple of ways that we could do this. If I pressed Command R, we can produce a loop that comes around, and I'll just put it in about like that. So that works. But one challenge is that it produces an uneven distribution of thickness because the length and width of the polygons is changing around the object. So we'd really like that, because we're working on a hard body model, and we'd like it to be a little bit more precise. So the way I'm going to do it is to be in face mode, which is what we're in. A, to select everything. Let's look at this in the front view. Press the I key to do an inset. And then this method will produce a consistent boundary all the way around it. Okay. So now what we want to do is come in and merge the 2 pieces of geometry. So at object level, we join them to become a unified object. Tab key, but they haven't merged the vertices. So A key, bring up the context menu, and then we will do merge vertices by distance. And you just want to be a little bit careful. Look for any vertices that are close together. In this model, they're all pretty far apart. So 0.01 centimeters works, and I collapsed 13 vertices. So let's turn subdivision back on, and we're going to notice something a little bit weird happening over here. That's a really good indicator that we have mismatched facing direction. So let's come up here and do face orientation. So select everything, come to mesh, and then normals, and do recalculate outside, and that fixes that weird problem for us. Okay, so let's come back and turn that off. Now when we look at this in the front view, we can see that it's produced that slight rounding, but we want to control this a little bit better. Let's come into outline, and we see this line right here. This is in the subdivided mesh, and it corresponds to this edge in the cage. So if we were to come over and turn off optimal display, we can see the actual polygons. And these polygons here, they get subdivided against this polygon, and those child polygons get blended, and it's pulling a little bit of curvature up there, and we'd like to control this a little bit better. So I'm going to double click this loop and do a Shift E and begin pulling, and you see how it constrains those subdivided polygons. Click and just make sure the factor becomes 1.0. You could have also just typed in 1 in mean crease, and that gives us a much better control right there. Now that we've gotten that in, we're pretty close to being done with this aspect of the modeling. Let's press the backslash key to return this so we can look at it in context of our actual model, and I think that looks pretty good for what it is that we need it to do. So the next thing that we need to do is create the cutout here. So let's do this. Let's come over to this top part of the model that we've been working on, and let's call this stapler top. And I'm going to duplicate this. So Shift and D, and we're going to hide the original. We just want to have that saved in case we mess up and we want to come back to it. Select this top profile curve and then press that backslash key so that we can work on just this. So we're going to go into wireframe view, Option Z to go into X-ray. We want to consider the resolution. In this particular case, this is a good reason why you would necessarily want to have optimal display turned off, because you want to see what the actual resolution of the geometry is. And we're going to actually go to this level 2, and then we're going to apply the subdivision. But we're also going to remove half of it because we don't need both halves. So let's come in. We're in select box mode. We're in X-ray, so we can just select half of it, press the X key, and delete those faces. What we need to do is cut out the top so it can be a separate material, and we need to reconfigure the geometry just a little bit. So let's come down over into this area. We're going to be doing a cut, and we've got some geometry here that's pretty close. I'm actually going to take these and we're going to dissolve those edges. In fact, we could probably also dissolve that right there. Now, let's come over and select this top curve, and we can come over and immediately go to Mesh and do a knife project. Let's make sure that we have cut through enabled. Switch over into vertex mode. Do you see how it's put a lot of these vertices in? Well, that's kind of a pain to clean up. So let's undo, and let's come back over here to top curve. We have to leave edit mode to make a change to this top curve. Let's come down here and reconfigure the resolution. So let's take it down to a value of 3. And when we look at it, you can see that that greatly reduces the number of vertices that we have to contend with. So even if we took it, say, down to 2, well, 2 really takes that down. In fact, 2 may work the best. It still maintains enough of the curvature that I think that'll be functional for us. So let's come back into edit mode, tab, select top curve again over here, and then let's run through this again. So we do knife project, switch over into vertex mode, and then we can hide that. And we have less of these vertices that we need to clean up. So that's the first thing that we want to do, is just to come in like this and remove those. So we do a dissolve vertices function. And then the next thing that we need to do is come in here and start looking for any areas like this, where these little triangles appear, that we want to clean up. Now, the next set of operations that we're going to do, there's not exactly one perfect way of doing this, so we'll just start at the top here. We do need to reconfigure the polygons to a degree in this cut area. So I'm going to come over and select these 2 vertices, press J, 1 key, goes into edge mode, and then we'll do a dissolve. Okay, and then one key, I'm going to take this vertex, press the G and G again to slide that. It's this sort of relationship that I'm interested in. GG, and I'm just going to quickly sort of change the topology here to blend that transition a little bit. Let's come down to the next area here. 2 key. Now I have assigned to my quick favorites dissolve and at last, which are 2 operations we're going to use a lot. 1 key, select this vertex and this vertex, Q key, and then at last. And then we'll do the same here. I can now use Shift R to repeat the last command. Okay, so we've gotten that kind of configured. Let's address this. This is kind of a tough area right here. I'm going to press GG, put that about right there, and J key, I'm going to reconfigure that, and 2 key, let's remove those edges, and then here to here, Q key where I have at last. So this is going to be a little bit, when you're doing this type of work, GG, it's going to end up feeling a little bit nebulous for a while. But what I'm going to end up doing is, in fact, I put that in and I'm going to remove it. You'll begin to see, J key, how you can reconfigure an area to have a flow of loops. And then we'll remove these. And now I've got a flow of quads here with a couple of triangles. So you see that flow that I've reconfigured around the boundary. It's not going to be perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect for this. This is fairly shallow geometry, so we have a little bit of forgiveness here when it comes to reconfiguring this. So GG, I'll just change that topology a little bit. Okay, that's all we need to do for right now. In fact, actually let's do this. GG, I'm going to pull that down. GG, and I'll pull that down, and I'm going to anchor these like that. Okay, so now we're ready to add the final geometry that's going to give us the little detail in here that we want. I'm going to do one last quick look. I think there's one. I'm going to take this vertex GG, and I'm going to just move that up right there so it has just a little bit better flow. Okay, we need to come in and add a mirror modifier to this. So let's add mirror again along the Y. There we go. And then tab key, we need to leave edit mode because this needs to be applied. Tab key takes us back into edit mode, and we look at this through the front view. Let's go into face mode. We're in X-ray because we see these little dots here. So now we need to come in and select this region at the top. So we're going to use the selection lasso and just start lassoing around these polygons, holding the shift key like that. Okay, so now we've gotten all of those, and we just need to, let's zoom down sort of because this is going to be a detail. I key to do an inset. And we want to pull this in about that much. It doesn't need to be much farther than that. Come back up here, double click this new boundary loop, because we've got this boundary loop that comes all the way in now. And we need to produce a secondary boundary. So again, I key and pull in just about that far. Doesn't need to be too much further. And then we need to come over to the extrude along normals tool, and we want to switch back over to the active tool so you can click, hold, and drag to extrude down a new set of polygons about like that. Press Command or Control R and place a cut right down the middle and hit return. Okay, so we've gotten that in place. So Option Z, we could come over and apply subdivision to this. Tab key, and we can look at that. But there's one final detail that we want to do to really make this nice. when we zoom down, I can see a little bit of shading here, like the rounding is a little bit ill-defined. Let's look at this in front view. Let's come over into wireframe. And it looks like, oh, there's something weird going on here too. Let's come in and edit this. Looks like there was an edge, an errant edge in the middle here. So let's remove these. So we'll just do dissolve edges. Okay, so now we come back into the front view and we look at this. These edges that we see in the subdivided cage belong and relate to these loops here. And the subdivision from these very thin polygons is blending into these long polygons here. And we're getting slight curvature, and you'll see slight shading pull up into here. So the way that we deal with this is by creasing these edges. So you press Shift and E, and you begin moving, and you can see those get snapped into that boundary where the cage edges are, and it focuses all that curvature and shading exactly where we want it to be, right there. Okay, so it's all right there. And then when we look at that, we get very nicely controlled shading along that boundary. So leave isolation mode, and there we go. All we need to do now would be to isolate these, apply a material to the top, and apply a material to the bottom, which would be very easy to do. But as far as modeling it, our model is now complete.